Okay, we're back to the marvelous Mrs. Maisel and starting with episode 6 of season 1, Mrs. X at the Gaslight. There's only a couple of things here. First, we meet Midge's sister-in-law Astrid about halfway into the episode, and we learn a lot of things about her really fast. But two things stand out. She's trying to get pregnant.
What methods did you and Joel use to get pregnant?
Well, sex.
Yeah, that seems to work for most people.
And she converted to Judaism.
I thought the converting would help. I know that it's hard having an outsider in your family.
When she gets something in her head, like the whole converting thing, she had to sign up for the accelerated conversion package.
I remember.
All to impress Mama.
Astrid is trying to get in the good graces of her narcissistic mother-in-law, Rose, someone who is obviously never going to accept her.
Beautiful, Mrs.
I'd never seen one that big before. Is that bad? Oh. I could return it. Oh.
You see, narcissists jump to conclusions. They'll decide long ahead of time, for example, that no one will ever be good enough for their golden child. And, since narcissists can't be wrong about anything, that person will never be good enough in the narcissist's mind. No matter what that person does, it will be devalued and discarded. Even if it's something the narcissist actually likes. All of a sudden they not only hate that thing, but act as if they would never have liked it to begin with. In fact, only crazy ugly idiots would have ever liked that thing, and how dare you to think that they would have ever liked it? The highly narcissistic and equally stupid thing about it is, this doesn't have anything to do with who Astrid is as a person. But because Rose prejudged her to be unworthy, something that happened before even meeting her, Astrid will always be less than others in Rose's mind. This is all really just the narcissist's magical thinking that they're never wrong about anything in their own minds. Rose didn't even have to meet Astrid before knowing she wasn't good enough for her family. One other thing in this episode before moving on. And that's this story Abe tells when they go out to dinner.
I offered to help. I was new to her class, and she thought it was cute that a 13-year-old would offer to help. Anyway, she let me try, and I graded them perfectly, without even using the key.
Narcissists love telling stories because it keeps all the attention on them. There are only two types of stories narcissists like to tell, other than their incomprehensible word salad anyway. The one where they are the hero and the other where they are the victim. Both types of stories typically are practically dripping with the narcissist's grandiosity. They really aren't that different from each other. Whether the narcissist is the hero or the victim of their story, the message of it will always be that the person with NPD is the best person in the world and everyone else in the story is just holding them back or suppressing their greatness in some way. And if they can put other people down in the process of telling said story, they will.
She looked at me astonished and then said, Abraham Weissman, you are a natural-born mathematician.
Did you stay in touch with her?
That moron? No. There were mistakes she didn't find in the papers she graded that day. So she left the school after that, on my recommendation.
Just a note about these narcissistic stories, but first and foremost, narcissists are liars. And any story they tell anyone else about something that may or may not have actually happened to them is a lie. It's either completely made up, or it really did happen, but the narcissist will add or subtract any details that makes them sound anything less than a god in human form. Narcissists do something called magical thinking, which makes them legitimately believe any of the lies they're telling other people, because, in their minds, they are never wrong. So no matter how much of Abe's story is actually true, he believes every word of it. Now, on to episode 7, put that on your plate. First, someone recently mentioned to me that they think Midge Maisel is a narcissist. So first let's look at evidence that she at least has empathy, something narcissists don't have at all.
You're starting to cry.
I'm not starting to cry.
You are too starting to cry, and that's gonna make me cry.
To me, Midge Maisel is an unawakened empath, and this show has yet to disprove that to me. However, she also gets more narcissistic as the show goes on. But unawakened empaths, especially ones who are currently being influenced and abused by narcissists in their lives, aka all unawakened empaths, will slowly become more narcissistic until it's almost impossible to tell the difference between them and the narcissist, except for moments like these. Moving on to this flashback that Joel is reminiscing on, Moish gives his 13-year-old son this friendly tip.
It's very important that you show people you're bigger and better than them, because if they think it, then you'll be it. That's how you get ahead in the world.
Basically that he should lie, cheat, and steal his way to the top because it's more important to look important than to actually be important. This is the credo of all narcissists, by the way. They feel they're entitled to their success and do things like lying about their accomplishments or cheating other people out of their work so they can steal all of the credit. Since people with NPD don't care at all about other people, doing stuff like this really doesn't bother them at all. It's why every one of them does it. There's surprisingly a lot to unpack in this short scene. For one, Joel's mom, Shirley, pushes her way into her son's room like he's still 7 or something. Narcissists don't really see other people's boundaries because they don't see other people as anything more than extensions of themselves. They will not only step over any boundaries you have by societal rules, but they will also ignore any boundaries you yourself lay down, and if you try to enforce them, they will continuously devalue that boundary as if having it is the worst thing someone could ever do until you give up on it, which is all they really wanted. Narcissists have an absolute addiction to controlling you, something they feel they have to do at all times. The other thing is that Shirley has already infantilized Joel. She even calls him a bad boy at one point.
Looking under the bed for the magazines you left when you moved out. I found them and threw them out. Bad boy.
Again, like he's 7. You see, all narcissists assign roles to all the people they know. Well, except their lost child, but watch my Encanto video for more information on that. But once you're in a role in their head, it's almost impossible for them to move you into any other role. Well, aside from becoming a scapegoat, which everyone kind of slowly becomes to a narcissist anyway, because no matter who you are, they have to devalue you in some way, so they can always feel like they're better than you. But here, Joel is in the role of a little kid that Shirley can dote on. She definitely does not see him as an adult who maybe needs space. The last thing to just quickly mention is that Shirley is basically ignoring everything her son is saying and practically having a conversation with herself. The funny thing is Joel probably doesn't even have to speak to get a narcissist to just ramble on like this. They will literally talk to no one forever, but just as long as someone is around to hear it. First and foremost, every narcissist needs an audience. They actually can't stand being by themselves for any length of time. Something I wanted to say about this scene where Midge and Imogene are packing bags for a kid's birthday party. Mostly that Abe has apparently called every friend Midge has ever had as Dodie.
Reading papers, so please, Miriam, Dodie, try to keep it down.
Why does he call me Dodie? She was my friend growing up. It's sort of a catch-all for whoever he sees me with.
People with NPD don't like calling other people by their names. It's kind of a weird trait, but it's true. They see remembering somebody's name as a sign of respect and camaraderie. And narcissists definitely don't respect anyone else. Well, except for complete strangers, because strange supply is always better to them than known supply. Or people, like celebrities, that they think is just as perfect as they are, until they do something that shows that they're only human, of course. As for camaraderie, narcissists see this as an attempt to be equal to them, and nothing is equal to the narcissist, or can be as perfect as they are in their own minds. Attempts at camaraderie, or similar situations where the narcissist has to see you as an equal, they will view as an attack as if you're trying to say that they are as lowly as you are. One more thing in this scene.
Set up a line like Henry Ford. Keep the piles separate, then pass the bags from one to the other.
But Abe comes back and then gives unsolicited advice as if he even knows what he's talking about. But narcissists think they know everything about everything, even when they've never even heard of the subject before. And also think that the world would be lost without their amazing leadership. I'm rolling my eyes as I say that, if you couldn't tell. Just wanted to mention this line.
Face-to-face is better, that's what you always said.
Don't listen to me.
If you were raised by a narcissist, you probably heard this phrase at least at one point or another. Do what I say, not what I do. Or something similar. This is because all narcissists are hypocrites about pretty much everything. This is because they legitimately believe that they are so special they don't have to follow any rules or laws, even the ones they make themselves. This is because if they followed those rules, they wouldn't be special anymore. Same as why they feel they need to cross over others' boundaries all the time. That's one of the many reasons anyway. Something about this dinner, that's that there's a total failure of communication between Abe and his wife, Rose. Rose thinks that someone with special needs who's been dead for 4 years is coming over.
So remember, he's got 90% hearing loss in his left ear, and his right ear is completely deaf.
Oh, and Mordecai Glickman is no longer with us.
Since when?
Since we went to his funeral 4 years ago.
That's right. It was the liveliest I'd seen Mordecai in years.
Meanwhile, Abe is actually bringing a divorce lawyer for Midge to finalize her separation with Joel, which in itself is just Abe stepping over everyone's boundaries again and trying to control everyone like he was trying to do in the scene with Imogene. But I wanted to talk about the failure of communication between Rose and her husband. This conversation seems to have gone that Abe told Rose that he was bringing a colleague for dinner, and that was essentially it. He didn't specify who it was, but narcissists more or less feel they never have to explain their actions fully to anyone. Kind of odd considering they never shut up most of the time. But pretty much anything you see as a common courtesy, people with NPD see as yet another rule they're entitled to step over. Also, everyone else should bow down and accept anything the narcissist has decided, since they see themselves as a king or queen that everyone should just obey. At the same time though, Rose didn't ask Abe to specify either. Narcissists typically don't like asking other people questions. Well, not unless they can put a sarcastic sting on it, or use it to devalue you.
I'd love to see the kitchen.
The kitchen? Really? Why?
But normal instruction-seeking questions they won't typically ask. Not after the love bombing stage anyway, where they're just trying to find your weaknesses. This is because needing to know something and asking a question about it would imply that the narcissist doesn't already know everything. So, like Rose in this situation, they'll just assume what you meant, assume that they're right because the narcissist thinks they're always right, and when it turns out they're wrong, they blame the other person for everything like Rose does here to Abe, as passive-aggressively as possible. Something Abe is completely unaware of is that he did anything wrong at all, but just like his wife, narcissists never think they're wrong about anything. If his wife is upset about something, it must not have anything to do with him. And if it doesn't have anything to do with him, why should he care about it? That's how narcissists see anyone else's problems anyway.
But this is my concern, not yours.
You're my daughter. Your concerns are my concerns.
Here's a line that essentially sums up exactly how narcissists see their children. They can't differentiate from anyone and see everyone as an extension of themselves. But their own children they see more than any other person, except for perhaps their main supply, as a doll they can use to live through vicariously, or infantilize, or devalue and abuse however they want. They are their property, they own them. And anything the narcissist wants is also what their children want. They can't see anyone as having their own wants and needs, actually. Whatever the narcissist wants is what everyone wants. And when someone says otherwise, it legitimately confuses them, just as Abe is confused here. Narcissists actually don't know how to allow others to be individuals. They don't see other people as actual human beings. Other people are just toys for them to play with. That's how they see it. Anyway, here's a quote I heard once. Narcissist is just another word for evil idiot. Just thought I'd throw that in there, it seems somewhat appropriate. In the next scene, Rose discovers that her psychic has been replaced.
Gina went back to the old country without telling me?
The old country, she's from the Bronx.
Oh, no, Gina's from Eastern Europe, a small city just outside Bucharest.
Okay.
You see, narcissists don't like change, except when it's a change they decide for themselves. Also, narcissists do this thing called magical thinking, which I keep mentioning, where they believe everything they think is true, even when someone is telling them the truth to their face. They'll still deny it if it contradicts something they've already decided. Also, I thought I'd mention that certain narcissists will believe in magic, or at least tell people that they do, but they tend to pick and choose, much like they do with everything else, what magic is real and what isn't. Something I've heard a narcissist say once was, "Astrology is shit, but I can speak to dead people."
But between you and me, the tea leaf thing, kind of a scam. Pyromancy, gazing into fire. Much more accurate, prettier too.
Likewise, many narcissists like to make believe that they have otherworldly powers. I've seen some that have said that God speaks to them, for example. But this is the exact type of stuff that narcissists will tell themselves, and as a result of their magical thinking, they'll believe it. And if they can get other people to believe it as well, it not only gives the narcissist lots of supply, but they will use this as an excuse to further manipulate others with this lie. Cults have been started with less. A couple of scenes later, Midge meets with Sophie Lennon, who is the 1950s female version of Larry the Cable Guy.
Get her done!
But it turns out her entire onstage persona is fake. Something not entirely uncommon among comedians, but you'll notice that the mask Sophie chose for her onstage presence is the exact opposite of how she behaves in her personal life. Narcissists don't have a true persona. Their whole life is a series of masks. Some can be just as extremely different from each other as Sophie's public and private personas are. An interesting thing to note, and quite true of all narcissists masked everywhere, is these masks don't touch each other. What I mean is that what might be true for one mask, like how onstage Sophie is kind and lovable, doesn't have to be true for any other mask they wear, like how private Sophie is actually very cold and distant. Another thing about this scene...
I'd love to see the kitchen.
The kitchen? Really? Why?
You'll notice that Sophie isn't just confused about Midge wanting to see the kitchen, but she asks why, as if only a simpleton would want to see one. Narcissists see everyone around them as extensions of themselves. Because of this inability to differentiate from others, they legitimately think everyone has the exact same feelings and opinions about everything as they do. It not only confuses the hell out of them when this turns out to not be the case, but they immediately start to devalue the person who proves to not think in the same way they do. This is why they see strangers as better supply than people they know, because other people are just as perfect as the narcissist until proven otherwise. Because the narcissist isn't just perfect in their imagined reality, they're the very model for perfection. If anyone doesn't fit into their mold, they must be worthless, due to the splitting that they do that does not allow any other categories, but perfect and worthless. But this is just how easily Midge slips from any good graces Sophie might have had for her. Just her wanting to see the kitchen, a perfectly normal curiosity for anyone to have, but not Sophie. And, as if a switch had just flipped, Sophie sees her as pure worthlessness incarnate now. Then, Sophie's advice to Midge is to become exactly like her.
They want a character.
But Bob Hope doesn't have a character. Lenny Bruce doesn't have a character.
They have dicks.
Midge is so disgusted with this, she turns down another macaroon. But Sophie interprets this as Midge taking the first steps to becoming a self-hating anorexic like she is.
No, thank you, Dawes.
You're learning.
Which, in Sophie's mind, makes Midge a bit closer to perfect than she was before. Again, Sophie sees herself as a model of perfection, and anyone who is different is worthless. Therefore, everyone must be jealous of her and constantly trying to be like her. And a narcissist's magical thinking covers up anything they see that tells them otherwise. Ultimately, this scene seems to be Sophie lording over Midge with all her power and success, basically showing off just how much better off she is than Midge. She doesn't notice that Miriam is so disgusted with her for being such a phony, but Midge knows by the end of this that she doesn't want to be anything like Sophie, which I personally think is why she self-sabotages herself at the end of the episode. Actually, Midge seems to have a subtle, even unconscious hatred for phonies throughout the series, something that is almost always brought out in her comedy.
Put that on your plate! Well, guess what? It's a fucking fat suit. And there is nothing on her plate. I ate with her. And when I had the audacity to take a bite of a cookie, she made me feel like I'd splashed her with a cup of syphilis.
This makes sense since she's surrounded by a lot of fake people in her personal life, but I'm not totally sure it's something she herself is aware of. Just a thought. Anyway, in the next scene, in the middle of the synagogue, Rose throws a humongous fit at Midge because she shows up in the coat Sophie gave her.
That, what are you wearing?
Oh, just long story. What page are we on?
137.
Well, tell me the story.
Borrowed it, okay? I borrowed the coat. Let's talk after.
No, let's talk now.
Mama, shh.
Don't shh me. Don't you ever shh me. Tell me where you got the fur coat. But the least you can do, Miriam, is tell me where you got the goddamn fur coat!
And Midge still doesn't want to admit to her mom and dad that she's doing comedy. Considering how much they scapegoat her, this makes sense because she knows, even if not completely consciously, that her parents will simply look down on it and devalue it, which they totally do when they figure it out in a later season. But Rose does a lot of narcissistic things in a very short amount of time. She steps over Midge's boundaries, she sees the fact that she's keeping secrets as a personal attack, she throws a tantrum, she makes a scene in the middle of church because her needs will always be more important than anyone and she thinks everyone is paying attention to her anyway. Rose is turning everything around to be about her, even though none of it has anything to do with her. But the very concept that Rose isn't the center of everyone else's universe is absolutely impossible in her mind. But that's just what magical thinking does to people. They believe in lies. Anyway, that's it for today. I'll be back soon though.